Hi and welcome to my Python YouTube channel. It's awesome to have you here. If you like this video, a thumbs up would be great. And make sure to subscribe for future videos. I also have a blog at prosperacoder.com with lots of cool stuff, so feel free to check it out. You now know how to position and scale widgets inside layouts, but we've been using only the float layout so far. Let's have a look now at how the other layouts work. Before we dive into the other layouts though, there's one thing you should keep in mind. The positioning and sizing properties do not behave in the same way in all the layouts. Sometimes their behavior is not what you expect. This is why it's easier to combine the existing layouts and embed them one into another so that we can reach our goal instead of using the properties described before. Don't get me wrong, you can use both properties and combining layouts into larger hierarchies, but the latter is usually more intuitive than the former, especially in less trivial projects. Anyway, in our project, we're going to use both techniques. Now I'm going to discuss each of the layouts one by one, keeping it as simple as I can, and then in the next part I'll show you a more complex example with embedded layouts. So, with float layout covered for now, let's move on to relative layout. Relative layout works pretty much like float layout, and the difference will be clear only later when we embed it in another layout. Here's a simple example with a relative layout and just one button in it. The button should be positioned at the fixed coordinates 0, 0 and occupy about a third of the available space in both horizontal and vertical direction. Here's the Python code. So we must import relative layout, this class, and now we're going to use the relative layout class over here. It's going to be returned. Now here is the very simple Kivy file. Here we have our relative layout with one button, and the button has three properties here set, so the text should be button, sizing, and position in the bottom left corner, so at position 0, 0. Now if you run this code, you will see something you would also see using the float layout. So what's the difference? As mentioned before, you will see the difference soon. And now, let's move on to the next layout, the grid layout. To demonstrate how a grid layout works, we'll need more than one widget in it. Let's create 5 buttons this time. Well, here's the Python code. We must import grid layout, the grid layout class. So from Kivy UIX grid layout, import grid layout, and we're gonna return the grid layout class over here. Now, with a grid layout, we must set the number of either rows or columns. The two properties that we use for that are rows and cols respectively. Then the available space will be filled in gradually so that the predefined number of rows or columns is maintained. But let me show it on an example. First, suppose we want the buttons to be in a grid consisting of 2 rows. So here's the Kivy file. We have a grid layout. We need 2 rows, so rows is set to 2. And now come the buttons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Very simple buttons with some text, some sizing, and that's basically it. Now, a few remarks about the code. First of all, watch how I set size hint to none, none over here, and the same in the other buttons. This is because I wanted fixed numbers of pixels, each button being 200 by 50 pixels. You already know how it works from the previous part. The second thing you notice is that the code is very repetitive. If you now wanted to change the size of the button, you'd have to do it 5 times on each button. So let's rewrite the code so that we avoid this repetitiveness. You already saw how to do it when we were talking about custom widgets. This time we'll do it for the original button class. So let's add the rule here. And now, here we put all the shared stuff. And now, here, where the buttons are, we can just remove the properties which are shared, so size hint and size, and leave just the text, which is different for each button. So let's remove this, 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 and this. Now the code is much less repetitive. So let's save, and now let's run the application. So we wanted the buttons to be in 2 rows, and they are in 2 rows, row 1, row 2. The grid layout is smart enough to know how many items to put in the first row before starting the second row. I numbered the buttons on purpose. You can now easily see what order the buttons are added in. First row 1 from left to right, 1, 2, 3. Then row 2 from left to right, 4, 5. For as long as there are any widgets left. And now I'm going to achieve the same effect using the cols property. Let's rewrite our Kivy code so that we now set the number of columns to 3. So cols 3. Fine. And this doesn't change, we have the buttons here. And now let's save, let's run. And here's what we get. So, see any difference? Well, in this particular case, there isn't any. This is just how it works. The widgets are added from left to right, row after row. So what if you set the number of columns to 2? Let's find out. 2 columns. Save. Run. This time we arrange the buttons in a different way, in 2 columns. But still you can see that the order of adding them is again row by row, from left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Okay, there is much more to the grid layout, but we'll be talking about some other grid-related stuff when we need it later in our project. For now, let's move on to the next layout. The next layout is box layout. The box layout is a very common layout, and we'll be making use of it a lot in our project. You can imagine it as a grid layout with just 1 row or 1 column. If you want all the elements to be positioned in 1 row, you should set the orientation property to horizontal, or just leave it out altogether, as this is the default value. If you want the elements to be in a column, you should set orientation to vertical. Let's see how it works. Here's the Python code again. So now we need the box layout, so let's import it. Box layout. And a box layout should be returned from the build method in the Hello World app class. So that's it as far as this file is concerned. And now the Kivy file. Now we want the 5 buttons that we have to be all in 1 row. First, let's make the buttons slightly shorter so that they all fit in 1 row. Let's make it 100 by 50 in the rule. And now we need a box layout here. And now the buttons should be all in 1 row. So the orientation property should be set to horizontal. But in this case, this is redundant because horizontal is the default value of this property. So we can also leave it out. And naturally, we don't need this calls property because it's a property on the grid layout class. Fine. So now let's save it here and let's run the application. So as you can see, now all the buttons are in just one row. And now let's put the buttons in a column. So all we have to do here is to set the orientation to vertical. Okay, save, run. Now the buttons are in one column. Good. The next layout we're going to talk about is the stack layout. Let's start with the Python code as usual. So we must import the stack layout. And a stack layout must be returned naturally. Fine. And now the Kivy file. Well, just like the box layout, the stack layout also has the orientation property, but it works in a different way. This layout arranges the widgets in a specific order and automatically moves on to the next row or column when it runs out of space in the current row or column. The orientation property takes one of the following values: right to left, top to bottom; left to right, top to bottom; right to left, bottom to top; left to right, bottom to top. Let's try it out. Here's the Kivy file. So we still have the button rule here, but let's change the size of the button to 300 by 200. Good. And now we have the stack layout. Now we want the buttons to be arranged from right to left, top to bottom. So the orientation is right left, top bottom. And now the buttons, we have 5 buttons here. We can just keep them. And let's save and run the app. Now watch what order the buttons appear in. First, right to left, and then top to bottom. So right to left, top to bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now let's test other combinations. There are only going to be changes in the Kivy file. So how about the order from left to right, top to bottom? Let's just change the orientation here. So left to right, top to bottom. Good. Let's save. Let's run. Fine. Now, as you can see, the order is left to right, top to bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. And now right to left, bottom to top. So right to left, bottom to top. Save, run. And now they're added in the following order: right to left, bottom to top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Finally, left to right, bottom to top. So, left to right, bottom to top. Save, run. And now they are left to right, bottom to top. Next, we have the anchor layout. We use this layout to anchor widgets in particular positions, like at the top or bottom or on one of the sides. It lends itself well to create menus. The two properties used with this layout are anchor X and anchor Y. Let's first rewrite the Python file to make use of the anchor layout. So we have to import the anchor layout first. Import anchor layout, and we must return anchor layout. Good. And now the Kivy file. So let's leave the button rule here. Let's make the size of the button 100 by 50 for our purposes. Now here we need an anchor layout. Good. No orientation property. And we'll have just one button here. So this will do, and the text on the button should be just button. Good. And now let's set the anchor X and anchor Y properties. Anchor X, let's set it to right. Anchor Y, let's set it to, suppose, top. Good. Let's save and let's run. So as you can see, now we have the button over here. It's been anchored to right horizontally and to top vertically. Well, I added just one button here because otherwise the buttons would be on top of one another and only the last one would be visible unless we change the sizes of some of them. This layout is more practical if you want to position a custom widget, or even more if you want to position another embedded layout. For example, you can imagine making a menu consisting of 5 labels positioned in a row inside a box layout and then positioning the whole menu inside the anchor layout. We're going to see some embedding examples in the next part. And now some more examples with the anchor layout. Only the Kivy file is going to change. So here is the first example. We want to position the button in the center horizontally and at the top vertically. So we have to change the anchor X property to center and leave the anchor Y property at top. And now let's save and run. As you can see, the button is now centered horizontally and it's at the top side of the layout vertically. And now let's place the button in the lower left corner. So what we have to do is change this to left and this to bottom. Good. Save, run, and now the button is here in the bottom left corner. Okay, just one more example. Let's say the button should be in the very middle. So we just set both anchor X and anchor Y to center. Save, run, and now the button is in the very center. So, now you more or less know how to use layouts independently. In the next part, I show you how to embed layouts in other layouts. We'll be embedding layouts a lot in the project. Okay, that's it for this video. If you like it, a thumbs up would be great. Also, make sure to subscribe for future videos. If you want to leave a comment or ask a question, you're welcome to do so. Thanks for watching.